Hello, hello. I thought I'd bring you a little bit of an update that probably matters to you if you're playing Sentinel in Mythic Plus as marksmanship, which if you're playing marksmanship in Mythic Plus, there's a good chance that you are, at least some of the time. And it is that they fixed the Ohn'ahran Winds talent, which is what you see on screen right now. So this talent previously didn't work at all in Mythic Plus, or rather, it would proc like once a key, just for some reason that we don't really understand. It would just never proc in Mythic Plus. It worked fine on dummies and everything. And we learned this some amount of weeks ago. I'm bad at timekeeping. But it seems that in one of the recent weeks, probably associated with the patch here, the hotfixes that came out lately, or I should say new content. Either way, it seems to be working now. So what does this mean for you? Well, let's look at what the talent does. So when your Eagle applies Spotter's Mark, it has a 25% chance to apply the Spotter's Mark to up to 3 additional nearby enemies. So this means potentially more AoE damage on our AoE trick shots. But more importantly, because of the Calling the Shots talent, every time you consume Spotter's Mark by pressing aim shot on targets that are affected by it, it reduces the cooldown of Trueshot by 2 seconds. Well, Ohn'ahran Winds gives us multiple Spotter's Mark potentially. It's gated behind some RNG, but on average you'll get some. And that means more Trueshot CDR. So this means that the builds on Icy-Veins here have been updated to, instead of grabbing Salvo down here, it now grabs Ohn'ahran Winds. So what does that mean for you in terms of overall DPS and stuff? Well, you lose around 2.5% single target, but you gain around 4% on 8 target AoE. It also has significantly shorter Trueshot cooldowns on AoE, from around 1 minute 22 seconds on average to 57 second Trueshot cooldown average on pure AoE. No impact on single target. So your Trueshot cooldowns on AoE will be much shorter than they are on single target, which is something that you may not be used to. And this can of course enable Trueshot timings that would otherwise not be possible, and that can mean greater DPS increases than the 4% that the Sims say, because sometimes this can be the difference between having Trueshot at the beginning of a pack versus getting it 20 seconds later in sort of the middle of one and then having to hold it for the next pack. That kind of thing you've probably experienced a few times. So yeah, we do lose some single target, but as I write here, think about it this way. If you actually care about your single target and you would take an AoE loss to do it, then you should probably be playing a Dark Ranger. Because Sentinel marksmanship's Mythic Plus strength is massive, regular burst AoE, and that is sort of what we're building for. We'll happily take single target losses to get that while we are within Sentinel, because the fact is, if you cared more about single target, sort of point for point, then you would, if you would sacrifice X amount of AoE to gain X amount of single target, then you should just be playing Dark Ranger. It's that simple. So given what sort of tool or what niche Sentinel marksmanship follows, I think that pretty much if you're playing Sentinel in Mythic Plus, this is the build that you should be running. All that really changes if you've been running my recommended build until now is basically moving Salvo over to Ohn'ahran Winds. If you haven't grabbed updated marksmanship Mythic Plus builds in a while, then you should just head to my guide here on Icy-Veins or on Wowhead, and you can just grab the Sentinel Mythic Plus talent build from there. I'll also drop a link to that in the description below. And the question I'm expecting to get is, what does this mean for Sentinel versus Dark Ranger? Essentially, I don't think it moves the needle that much for Sentinel versus DR. I mean, if anything, the gap in terms of their respective niches is widening. What do I mean by that? Well, it's that Dark Ranger is already massively dominant on single target and AoE. And single target and priority target damage, meaning damage to the primary target that you're hitting or sort of cleaving off of in AoE situations, which is nice for equalizing the HP of different mobs so that you're not left with a single mob at the end of the pack that you're just single targeting. That is the main strength of Dark Ranger, and of course there's way more burst damage. In practice, I'm often seeing 20% more burst damage. That dichotomy basically remains the same, and the way I see it, there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution or answer to what hero talent is best in Mythic Plus for marksmanship, which is actually a really good situation to be in, but of course it can be frustrating when you just want to know what's best. I get it. The way I see it is, I think that Dark Ranger is mostly going to be best for most people in any dungeon that isn't Floodgate, Cinderbrew, or Priory. And the reason I single those 3 dungeons out is because they're the most AoE-heavy dungeons in general, where mass AoE generally carves through the dungeon quicker. But there will be situations, especially if you are the mage replacement in a group. the meta right now, as I make this video at least, is Arcane, Boomkin, Unholy DK. Well, if you're replacing the mage, in the meta, the Arcane Mage's sort of niche, what they do is priority target and single target damage, which are kind of weaknesses of Unholy and Boomkin. So if you're replacing the mage, then it makes sense to try and replace the mage's niche, which you would do with a Dark Ranger sort of setup. But if you're replacing either the Boomkin or the Death Knight, or you're just playing in a comp that doesn't resemble the meta comp even remotely, then you may prefer the heavy AoE of Sentinel. So it's always, it's always a mixture of both the dungeon, the damage profile of the dungeon. Then there's of course an element of, routing. Then there's an element of group composition and what niche you're expecting to fill within that group composition. So yeah, what I do recommend that, no matter what your situation is, if you're playing in an organized group or if you're pugging, you should try both. I mean, there are resilient keys for a reason. You will do lots of keys that don't necessarily give you IO or super high pressure. I'll say that, if you just really like Sentinel or really like Dark Ranger, I don't think you're really wrong to play whatever you prefer in every dungeon so much. I don't think it's a huge deal. But I do think if you're a discerning min-maxing hunter, that you should be trying both. And you may find that you really like Dark Ranger. I see a lot of people who they'd only play Sentinel because they're a little bit worried about Dark Ranger and because there's a little bit more to it. Well, I have a lot of good guides up on my YouTube recently. Like there's a burst opener on my shorts, and I have a detailed marksmanship Dark Ranger guide and some commentaries from Mythic Plus that you can take inspiration from. So it's a great time to learn it. And even if you try Dark Ranger and then you go back to Sentinel, you've still grown as a player. So that's what I'd say. No matter what you end up, you should at least try both because that is the basis of having an informed opinion. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So TLDR, grab the new build in Icy-Veins, enjoy shorter cooldowns on Trueshot. And that's pretty much it. Good luck out there and peace.